Hey, welcome again to Books on Mythology. Today we're going to talk about Mexico and Central America. Now, usually Mexico is lopped in with Central America when we talk about Mexican mythology, because basically the civilizations were spread not only in Mexico but throughout Central America, specifically, for example, the Maya. The Maya had their civilization in parts of Mexico all the way down into modern day Honduras and Guatemala. As a matter of fact, I believe their tallest pyramid is in Guatemala, and it's called Tikal. And usually, when it comes to the civilizations of Mexico and Central America, well, there were many, but usually there's a big three that come to mind. The oldest were the Olmec. The second were the Maya, and they had their biggest heyday when Europe was in the Middle Ages, pretty much. They spoke a language called Mayan, which is why they're called the Maya. And finally, you had the Aztecs, which were in the height of their power. They were this great empire, of course, when the Spaniards first came to Mexico. The Aztecs spoke a language called Nahuatl, and they had their center in a city called Tenochtitlan, which today is Mexico City. So to get started, there's this first the first book I'm going to talk about is a nice, really great general survey, the mythology, simply called The Mythology of Mexico and Central America, and it's by John Bierhorst. And again, this is a simple to read, lovely collection of the stories, a lot of the main stories of Mexico and Central America, of the Aztec and the Maya, and he gives some analysis and some meanings to the myths. And he goes by subject, like he talks about story types, and then he gives examples of the story. So that's a good book. Another one that is a little smaller but crammed with information is this wonderful little book. It's part of a series called The Legendary Past, and I have several of these books. I've mentioned them in other videos, and this one is called Aztec and Maya Myths, and it's by Karl. Taube, and again, the story lengths are a little shorter in this book, of course, but wow, it includes just about so much important stuff. So either this book or the other book are really good to start off with. If you really want to get into something a little more technical and a little more dense and scholarly, I enjoyed this book a lot. Myths of Ancient Mexico, and it's by Michael Graulich. Michael Graulich. I read it a long time ago. I don't remember too many details about it. I think I really enjoyed its collection of analysis of the five eras. In Aztec and Mayan mythology, we're living in the fifth era, the fifth sun, so to speak. Humans were around four previous times, and they were each destroyed. One time we were destroyed by water, another time by fire, another time we were eaten by jaguars, and we're actually living we're the people of the fifth sun. Very interesting stuff. Now, getting a little more specific now is this wonderful book on just Aztec mythology, rather than just general Aztec, Mayan, Mexican, Central America. There's this book called The Hungry Woman: Myths and Legends of the Aztecs, and it's by the author that wrote the first book, John Bierhorst. This guy wrote a lot of books on Native American mythology. I've read several of them. It's wonderful, and this is a little book, large writing, illustrations, and very simple to read. But he goes through a lot of pivotal myths of the Aztecs. He talks about the creation of the world. The hungry woman, by the way, is another term for the earth, because she's hungry. And it tells the stories of the gods Quetzalcoatl and Tezcatlipoca, and how they created the earth. It talked about early mankind. It even talks about the Virgin of Guadalupe, which is so important to the Mexicans to this day. And so again, really wonderful. Another book that is really more specific. I found this book by accident, and it's quite a charming book. It's called Lord of the Dawn, The Legend of Quetzalcoatl, and it's by Rudolfo A. Anaya. Rudolfo A. Anaya. And what I really found amazing about this book is that in a lot of books on Mexican and Central American mythology, one of the most important gods is Quetzalcoatl. Quetzalcoatl means the feathered serpent or the plumed serpent. Whenever you see an image of a serpent head with feathers, you know that's Quetzalcoatl. His Mayan name is Cococan, by the way. And now they always refer to Quetzalcoatl in so many books on mythology, but this is the only account I found that really is just about his story. So at length, which is why I really liked it. Quetzalcoatl is a very complex god. Sometimes in some myths he's a god. In other stories he's mortal. He's a virtuous king. In this collection of stories, he's mainly the king of a previous civilization to the Aztecs called the Toltecs. They had a civilization. Their center was in Tula or Tolan, and they were known as the Toltecs. And they fell into decline before the Aztecs rose to power. So a lot of stories of the Aztecs have to do with this mystical empire called the Toltecs that were once great, and then they fell into this decline because their king Quetzalcoatl was very virtuous, but he was made to commit a sin, an immoral act, due to the machinations of another figure called Tezcatlipoca, who in other stories is also a god. His name means smoking mirror, and he tricks him into committing immoral acts, and it leads to the decline of the Toltec Empire. So again, this book is really good if you just focused on the long, lengthy discussion of the myth of Quetzalcoatl by the Aztecs. Okay, now we're really going to go into the good stuff. Okay, I mean, this whole previous stuff is pretty damn good, but now I'm going to give you this book that is just one of the most amazing books in the universe. Okay, before I tell you the name of the book, okay, ready? When the Spaniards came into Mexico and Central America in the early 1500s, they of course introduced their writing system, and to write down their Spanish, of course. Well, there was a Mayan living in Guatemala, specifically a place called Chichicastenango, and what he did was he was very wise, and what he did was, thankfully for us, he learned this alphabet that the Spaniards brought over. And what he did was he said, "Hey, you know what? I'm going to write down the lore of my people, our Bible." And he took the alphabet and he wrote down in Mayan the great book that. The great spiritual book that belonged to the Mayan people. And what he did was he took this manuscript to a priest. Now, luckily, this priest wasn't some fanatic. He didn't feel like every fragment of pre-Christian belief had to be stamped out. He took this manuscript and he made a transcript of it. And he gave the original back to the Native American, to the Mayan. And he thanked him for it. And then this original manuscript and the Mayan, that particular Mayan that wrote it down, disappeared from history. They're gone. We don't hear from them anymore. But luckily, the priest had his transcript, and he made it into Spanish. What this book is? It's called the Popol Vuh, and it's the sacred book, the sacred Bible of the Mayan people, specifically the Quiche Maya of Guatemala. Specifically to them. And it's the sacred book of the ancient Quiche Maya, Popol Vuh. This particular version is by Recinos. Now, there's three authors, actually. Getz, Morley, and Recinos. But don't worry about their names too much, because I have a better version of this book. It's this one, by Dennis Tedlock. Now, the reason why I like this one better is this version is fine. I loved it. The problem is that it's an English translation from a Spanish translation from the original Mayan. Okay, this book by Dennis Tedlock, an amazing scholar, is directly from the Mayan. Okay, so I liked this book. I loved this book because not only is it a better translation, but he has all kinds of information about the meaning of the stories in here. There's even photographs. This scholar took his subject so seriously, he even became a daykeeper, so he could understand the spiritual mindset of the Maya. A daykeeper is kind of a soothsayer, a diviner. Of modern day Mayans, believe it or not. So, what is this book about? I'll give you the subtitle: the definitive edition of the Mayan book of the dawn of life and the glories of gods and kings. Wow. Basically, this book goes through several important things. One of the first things is the creation of humans, and after many failed attempts, disastrous attempts, humans are finally made from corn, and then it goes into the exploits of two brothers, which are the main heroes of this story. And what these two brothers do is they go to the underworld. After doing other exploits, they go to the underworld and they beat death in a ball game. And it's funny because in world mythology you have a motif called the harrowing of hell. Okay, where some hero goes to the underworld, the land of the dead, which is something that people don't want to think about because we're all going to wind up there. But they go to the land of the dead and they conquer it and they bring back something essential. I mean, think of in Greek mythology Hercules when he goes down to the underworld to rescue Theseus, or bring back the wife of Admetus. Because he was strong enough to actually go to defy death. Well, that's what these two brothers did. They defied death. Now, some say that by conquering death, one interpretation I read is that it sort of allowed the crops to grow, because when death is conquered, when the underworld is conquered, the crops will grow and give life to people who depend on food. But that's just one interpretation. I don't know. There's probably many others. But another interesting thing is that they beat the Lords of Death in a ball game. Now, what is this ball game? Well, when I was in Mexico, I saw several courts of this ball game they played. It's a type of game where there are these stone hoops, and they have to get this hard rubber ball through them. And there were two teams, and the winner, well, there's two things I hear. One is, this was a sacred game. It wasn't just simply a basketball game that you would watch for fun. It had sacred significance. And one interpretation was it was so sacred that the captain of the winning team was sacrificed to the gods. In other places, I heard that the captain of the losing team is sacrificed to the gods. When I was in Mexico, the tour guide told us the captain of the winning team was sacrificed to the gods. You're thinking, boy, I don't want to win. I don't want to be sacrificed. But it was seen as an honor. And I kind of like the idea of the captain of the winning team being sacrificed to the gods, because I don't think the gods would be happy if the captain of the losing team was sacrificed to the gods. But anyway, moving on. After the two brothers, defeat death. Then it goes on to a lengthy narrative of the wanderings of the Maya, how they wandered in the dark until they found the land that they were going to build their civilization, and then they watched the sunrise for the first time. It's funny because the Aztecs, when you read the other stories, the other books I have, the Aztecs have a similar myth of sort of wandering around, not knowing where they're going, until they came up. They were told in the prophecy they were going to come across a cactus with an eagle on it eating a snake, and that's where they were going to build their empire. And sure enough, today's Mexican flag has an eagle eating a serpent on top of a cactus. So it sounds very familiar, doesn't it? Kind of reminds you of the Bible and the Jews wandering the desert until they came to their promised land. We have another motif here. Okay, so if you're going to read anything of these books, I would say, I really like this book a lot. I like. You can also read one of these two books to give you a very rounded understanding of Mexico, the mythology of Mexico and Central America. But whatever you read, you gotta read You got to read this. I mean, forget about everything I told you. Read this book. It is the most is one of the oldest, if not the oldest book of the Americas. All of the Americas, North America, Central, South America. Okay, so I'm excited enough. So I have to end this video. So until next time, happy reading.